Imagine selling over $400,000 worth of coaching in one weekend. That is the beauty of high ticket coaching sales. I'm going to share with you what that looks like in this video. Obviously, it's really exciting to think about selling big, high dollar programs and packages in coaching. And the fact is that if you offer value through your coaching, you can make that kind of money too. But what I've learned and what I experienced myself and have seen with client after client is that the biggest factor in being able to charge high price points is your own mindset. See, a lot of times we want to charge a lot of money. We want to have high price points. We want to have boutique offerings, but we run into the same gremlin of, am I worth it? Am I good enough? Can I charge that? So in this video, I'm going to share with you some of what I've learned for myself and also seen work in my clients to be able to raise our value proposition and raise our price point. So before we get into the strategies for raising your prices, I just want to remind you of this thing that you may not even realize, which is that every dollar that you raise your prices above your cost is a full dollar in your pocket. So I think that raising prices is the single best use of your time and energy. If you can figure out a way to raise your prices, 20% or even 30% and you're covering costs, that means you're raising your profits even more than 20 or 30% sometimes. So now that I've made a case for why we should raise our prices, let me share with you a couple of the things or a few of the things that are really important in order to do it. The first is that you've got to have a compelling promise, a compelling outcome for the value that you deliver. Now, this means that you really focus on outcomes for clients rather than process. A lot of times I say, sell the promise, not the production. Sell the cure, not the medicine. So we want to shift our mindset away from selling, for example, coaching services or sessions, which are medicine, essentially, and selling the outcome. What are you going to get from the coaching? What are you going to get from taking the medicine? The second thing is you might have to change the clients that you're working with. It happens very often that I'm working with somebody who wants to raise their prices and has the value proposition to do it, but is focusing on an audience that really doesn't have the wherewithal to invest. So really wanting to look at who are the people for whom this value proposition is the most valuable. So I'll give you an example. I used to offer my services to corporate clients, and there's pretty much kind of some corporate standards and structures and pricing. And then I started to move into the entrepreneur community. And what I discovered with the entrepreneurs is that this same investment that a big corporation could make a much bigger proportional outcome for them. So whereas a big corporation might invest $10,000 or $20,000 for me to deliver a training to their people, that same $10,000 or $20,000 invested by an entrepreneur could yield a much bigger outcome. So looking at who your audience is, who is what you offer worth the most to. The next thing to think about is if you're going for profitability and high price points, then we don't need a huge model. It doesn't have to be a mass market model. You don't need 100 clients to make $1 million, right? With the right price point and packages, if you had a $20,000 or a $30,000 offer, you might only need 30 or 40 clients to hit $1 million. Now, I discovered that a few years ago. I used to work my butt off for $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And when I shifted into a high ticket coaching model, I was able to reduce the number of clients I worked with and raise my profits and raise my revenues. Another thing to think about as we move into this higher price point category is a mindset shift away from whether a client can afford this and wants to pay for it to whether a client is a good fit or not. See, I'm a big believer in high ticket programs. If you get the right person, they will get results. So instead of trying to sell to anybody who can afford it, what I'm looking for is to sell to the person who I know is going to implement, who's going to be disciplined, and who's going to be devoted, because that's the person who's going to generate the outcome. And again, I don't need 100 clients. I just need a handful of really, really good clients and a program that has a big back end that allows them to stay for the long haul. The last couple of things are that you want to up-level the quality of your marketing and your sales to go along with a higher price point offering. You can't have a cheesy or cheap marketing and sales process if you're trying to sell an upscale program or product. So I'm a big believer in that you have to align the messaging and the marketing to this higher level audience, and opportunity. Now let's get into how to do these things. But before I get into the 3 things that you need to look at, go ahead and click like on this video and please subscribe to my list so that you'll get notified every time I drop a new video. So I've structured this content into 3 categories: before the sale, the offer or invitation itself, and then after the sale. Before the sale is all about how you lead people into your high ticket coaching program offer. What I've seen work the best for myself and for my clients is to, instead of trying to make an offer for a really high ticket program cold from scratch, and I'm not saying you can't do it, but this is what I've seen. I'm a big believer in having a beginning step into the high ticket program. So what that means is, let's say that the high ticket program that you're focusing on is, let's say, a $20,000 offering for a year's worth of online coaching or group coaching or mastermind or something like that. Now that's the big ticket program. That's what I call the big back end. Now I find that it's not that easy and not that effective sometimes to sell straight away into that 20,000 program. Now I've done it, but the problem with doing that has been, in a couple of cases, that I've ended up with a person that I'm stuck with for an entire year who wasn't a great fit. So that means that leading up to the sale, I've discovered that what works better is to have a trial period, a test product or program that's a lower price point, but that leads them up into the higher price point. Now, my personal favorite test program is a retreat. That's what I call also a breakthrough program. So what I love to see is doing a breakthrough program at $2,000 or $3,000 that delivers a great value, delivers a juicy outcome, and that sets people up for that next offering. And then what I do, for example, in mine, is on the second day of that breakthrough program, which is a 3-day retreat, I invite the people who are interested to have a conversation with me about moving into the full year program. And what I let them do is I let them know is if they decide to join that full year program, if it's a right fit, then we'll apply whatever they invested in that retreat or that initial breakthrough program towards the full year. Now, what that model accomplishes is a few things. Number 1, it allows you to really see if that person is a right fit. If you're in a compressed time frame program like a 3-day retreat for $2,000 or $3,000, you really get a sense of what this person is like. And the fact is, in that situation where I sold someone directly into that big back-end program, if I had instead made sure that she went into that 3-day program first, I would have realized that she wasn't a fit into the long-term program, and I wouldn't have enrolled her in that program. So I'm a big believer that you start with something small and more easily accessible and then roll them into the higher level, and that's a much easier transition into that higher level program. Now, another thing in terms of the before the sale, before you make that offering, is raising your value proposition, your perceived value. Now, I love to use the example, if you're a woman, you'll know, of Christian Louboutin shoes. Christian Louboutin shoes are also called the red bottom shoes. These are the shoes that have the red platform underneath, the red sole. Now, that red sole that Christian Louboutin has is an immediate signal to people that that's a premium product. They can charge a lot more for their shoes than almost anybody else because they have this signature red sole. Now, how does that apply to you and me is that when we are coaches and we're trying to sell high ticket programs, what we want to show is that we have a unique differentiator, that we have something that makes us high level, special, unique, and more effective than anything else out there. And so what you want to look at is, how do you deliver the results you deliver? What is the way that you get people to go from A to Z? What's that journey? And then codifying that journey into some sort of signature system, aka your red soul. So my signature system is the Superstar system and the Retreats to Riches system. And my Retreats to Riches system is a program that gets people from not knowing how to do a retreat into being able to monetize retreats and generate big back-end revenues. That's mine. I invented it. I developed it. I named it. It's Retreats to Riches. It's my thing. And that has a higher perceived value than just a coach who helps people put together events, right? So what's your unique thing? What's your red soul? How do you deliver results that are above and beyond anybody else? Another thing to think about for higher ticket programs is, what's your narrow focus? I personally used to coach people across a variety of different fields and industries and all sorts of different things. And over the years, I've narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed down to speakers, authors, coaches, helping them monetize and create group coaching programs. And the narrower I've gotten, the easier it's been to make sales else because it's easier for people to find me, especially here on YouTube. So I'm a big believer in narrowing the focus, getting clear about the audience you serve, raising that value proposition, identifying that unique red soul, and elevating the type of clients that you work with so that you can raise your price points. Now, when it comes to the second phase, which is making that offer and inviting people to join your high ticket program, you might think that a high ticket program, a higher price point would require more pressure, more sales tactics. And in fact, I'm going to advocate quite the opposite. I've seen in my own experience, and I've witnessed it with clients, that the more loosely you hold the sales conversation, the easier it is to enroll people into high ticket offers. What I mean is, if you come even with a hint of scarcity around these offers, people can feel it. And they often can feel manipulated by it if they feel pressured. So what I advocate is for you to get really neutral and really detached from the outcome, and instead approach your invitations and your offerings as a service conversation. That's why I call it sales as service. So what that looks like, instead of coming to the conversation with this agenda of, I'm gonna close this person, I'm gonna make this sale. And that can work. I'm not saying that doesn't work. But instead of coming with that energy, coming with the energy of, I'm gonna serve this person. I'm gonna check and make sure they're a right fit. I'm going to hold my standards for who I'm enrolling into my high ticket program, and I'm only going to enroll them if they're a right fit. People can feel that too. And that generates trust, and that generally leads to longer term client relationships. So by the way, everything that I'm talking about here requires that you're having a conversation with somebody. I absolutely do not advocate ever making a high ticket offer via a webinar or a sales funnel. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying you can't make the sale that way. But what I'm saying is, for the kind of business that I want to have, with clients that last with me for years and years, with clients who love me and the work that I do, with clients who are fully engaged and committed, I believe that it takes a meaningful conversation for enrollment. And in that meaningful conversation, your goal is not to move people from a no to a yes, or pressure them, or create scarcity tactics, or all the things that you learn in all these different sales things. Your goal is actually to check for fitness and commitment. Fitness means, how appropriate is this client for you? Do you want to work with them? Will they get results? Do you believe that they'll do the work? And that's actually the commitment piece. Are they committed to doing the work to generate the outcomes? In high ticket coaching, you might be the best coach in the world, but if your clients don't do the work, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to do it for them. That's not coaching. That's something else. And so you need to make sure that the people that you're enrolling are people who are devoted and committed to doing the work. That's why, for example, whenever I'm selling a high ticket program, I ask this question every single time. How committed are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to making this happen? And if they say anything less than a 10, I tell them I don't work with anything less than a 10. A 9 is just a 1 in disguise. That's a line my mentor Jake used to tell me. Because a 9 or anything less than a 10 is not fully committed. And I don't want people who are not fully committed. If you're going to be charging high price points, you got to have the high caliber clients to go with it. If you charge a high price point and the people are not committed and they don't get results, the person that's going to suffer is you, because it's your reputation on the line. They're not going to take responsibility. They're not going to go around telling people, yeah, I signed up for this really expensive program, but I didn't do the work, but it wasn't her fault, it was mine. That's not what happens. They end up going around and telling everybody that program was really expensive and it didn't work. So you have to make sure that you're getting the right people into your programs. Okay, now that I got that point across, the third phase or important thing to consider is what happens after the sale. Once you've enrolled somebody in this high ticket program, put yourself in their shoes. They are probably freaked out. This may be the most that they've ever invested in themselves. This may be the most that they've ever invested in anything but a home or a car. And so what you want to do is make sure that you reinforce right away that they made a great decision. One way that you can do that is that right away they get something of high value that they really need and really want. So for example, when I enroll a brand new person into my influencer circle during a retreat, the first thing we do is we schedule their deep dive with me. A deep dive with me is a one-on-one session. Now keep in mind that after we've spent a retreat together, they perceive my time and my expertise as very high value. And so by setting up that deep dive with them within the next week, they feel really good, like, oh wow, I'm going to get something of high value right away. And the second thing that that accomplishes is it helps them get a real big result very quickly. Having a 90-minute conversation with me can be a game changer sometimes. I can identify a really valuable way to generate revenues quickly or find something that they're doing that's not working. I can usually deliver a lot of value very quickly so that they can get a quick result. And so I highly recommend, if you're going to enroll somebody into a high-ticket program, give them something really powerful very quickly and focus on that first 90 days. You know, if your program is only 90 days, then that's fine. But if you're looking at a 1-year program, for example, that first 90 days is critical. You want to give people outcomes as quickly as possible. And also that's when they come with the most energy. That's when they're the most motivated to implement things. So take advantage of that energy that they have right away. And of course, as you're doing that and as you're helping them get big, powerful outcomes quickly, that's the perfect opportunity to generate referrals from them. So don't forget, remember, as you're working with people in that first 90 days, that's a really good time to ask them, hey, do you know anybody else who could use outcomes like this, who could use support like this? And that will help you to grow your program back on the front side and have more conversations with more powerful people that are a right fit. If you're working with somebody that's a perfect fit, chances are they know other people who are a perfect fit too. If this video was valuable for you and you're excited at the prospect of generating high-ticket coaching sales, let's connect. You can set up a discovery call with me for free or somebody on my team at superstaractivator.com/go. I look forward to meeting you.